In 13th century Western Europe, Jewish philosophical thought was centered on the Maimonidean project. This intellectual movement sought a perfect harmonization, aligning the rigorous logic of Aristotle with the divine revelation of the Torah. This era operated on a specific core assumption. Demonstrative philosophy and prophetic Torah were viewed as different representations of the exact same truth, perfectly overlapping into a unified whole. Isaac Albalag challenged this consensus with a single, highly controversial treatise, Sefer Tikkun Hadayat. This text, the Amendment of the Opinions, was structured as a translation and critical commentary on Al-Ghazali's summary of philosophical doctrines. Albalag's work was driven by a need to purge philosophical discourse of errors. He aimed to strip away theological compromises and restore a rigorous Aristotelianism, primarily through the interpretations of the commentator Averroes. Albalag's approach shatters the Maimonidean synthesis. He proposed a replacement framework known as the doctrine of the double truth. This doctrine posits that a mathematically proven scientific truth and a scriptural truth can directly contradict one another, while both remain absolutely true. Albalag applies this high-stakes logic to the most difficult question of medieval thought, the origin of the universe. Natural philosophy demonstrates that the universe is eternal. Conversely, the Torah dictates temporal creation, a specific starting point in time. Albalag accepts both as factual. This paradox functions as a rigid enforcement of epistemological boundaries. To understand it, we must first deconstruct Albalag's exact physics of causation and his radical redefinition of the human mind. Reconciling an eternal universe with the requirement of a creator requires solving a fundamental physics problem. Albalag begins by rejecting the concept of a temporally created universe, one with a defined beginning in time. He argues that confining a perfect creator's action to a specific moment imposes a temporal limitation on divine perfection. A perfect being's act of creation is, by definition, free from the constraints of time. To bridge the gap between eternity and creation, Albalag proposes the theory of eternal origination, or Hidush Nesihi. The foundational premise is that the universe relies entirely on continuous motion provided by the prime mover. The prime mover is the Aristotelian first cause, responsible for all cosmic movement. Albalag classifies existence into two groups: left, things independent of motion; a builder leaves, but the house remains; right, things dependent entirely on motion. Wind exists only while air moves. When motion stops, it vanishes. Albalag maps the universe strictly to this second classification. Under this model, if the prime mover's motion were to pause for even the twinkling of an eye, the universe would instantly cease to exist. Requiring perpetual motion to avoid annihilation, continuous motion constitutes continuous creation. The universe has no beginning, yet it is always being actively originated. Albalag insists that eternal origination must be proven through strict Aristotelian demonstration. His primary target is Avicenna, whom he accuses of contaminating Aristotle's logic with Neoplatonic additions. Avicenna formulated the demonstration of the truthful, which attempts to prove God as a necessary existent purely through the metaphysical analysis of being. Albalag rejects this proof by invoking a strict Aristotelian rule regarding scientific domains. The rule states that no science can demonstrate the existence of its own subject matter. Because the first principle is the subject of metaphysics, the metaphysician cannot prove its existence from within that field. Proof of the prime mover must come from natural physics, the study of motion, rather than abstract metaphysics. This graph shows Avicenna's emanation cosmology, a first principle cascading into a degraded web. Albalag rejects this. His corrective Averroist model forms a vertical hierarchy, where all intellects receive causation directly from the first intellect. Albalag thus constructs a purely mechanical, logically rigorous universe, removing Avicenna's mystical blurring of categories. With the physics of eternal origination demonstrated, we must address the Torah's explicit claim of a temporal creation. Maimonides attempted to resolve this by allegorizing scripture until it matched the requirements of physics. Albalag condemns this approach as a hasty arrogance that compromises both faith and scientific wisdom. He defines a strict biological limit to the philosopher's mind. Human assent depends entirely on empirical data. We must build our knowledge from the ground up. This diagram shows the human cognitive process. We take raw sensory data and push it upward through abstraction to reach an intelligible form. The prophet possesses a different nature entirely. Albalag rejects the idea that prophets are merely philosophers with strong imaginations. He places the prophet within the transcendent realm. On this second axis, prophetic apprehension bypasses the abstraction layer. Prophets perceive the intelligible instantaneously, without physical tools or sensory input. Their cognition flows in reverse. They perceive sensory, physical objects through the intelligible. Because prophetic knowledge is non-discursive and atemporal, these two opposite cognitive mechanics can process the same reality but produce contradictory outputs. Albalag establishes a definitive cognitive divide. The philosopher perceives from below, while the prophet perceives from above. This divide explains the universe's origin paradox. The philosopher accepts eternal origination based strictly on natural science and geometric demonstration. Simultaneously, the believer accepts temporal creation through simple faith, based on the prophet's transcendent authority. Both conclusions remain true within their respective domains. Albalag argues that forcing an artificial merger between these two distinct realms fundamentally breaks the physics and corrupts the pure truth of the prophecy. His legacy is an uncompromising demand for Aristotelian rigor, unpolluted by theological convenience. Isaac Albalag's double truth represents a mathematically sound recognition of the absolute limits of human reason.